diabetes management. Now, I am not a medical doctor. I am not a nutritionist or registered dietitian. However, what I'm presenting to you today is just scientific information based on a lot of different doctors. And that's what we're going to focus on. So when I taught a plant-based living class at Sacramento State University, taught it for 3 or 4 semesters, and this was prior to the shutdown. So the class was geared towards people 60 and older. Every single semester, I had at least 100 people in my class. And that just shows you that you can teach an old dog new tricks, so to speak. It just shows you the level of dedication that these people had to change their health. And a lot of them had diabetes. And a lot of them would write me notes. Thank you so much. I'm now off my insulin. But it had nothing to do with me. It had to do with the doctors I quote, the doctors I brought into the class. I can't do that now. They're probably not awake at this time, but they wouldn't want to come into my daughter's house. So I'm going to take that information from the doctors and I'm going to give it to you. So I'm just the cheerleader. I'm just the disseminator. Like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Terminator. I'm the disseminator. I just provide the information from all the research that I do, just so that we can learn about top superfoods for diabetes management. So what are our objectives for today? Our objectives, did it skip the slide? Whoops, there we go. Our objectives. We are going to talk right here, see where it says doctors? That's what we are going to talk about. We are going to talk about what doctors recommend as the superfoods to manage diabetes. And I'm going to quote from Dr. Michael Greger, who wrote, well, his new book is coming out, How Not to Age. I hope we can do a whole series on that book. I'm going to propose it to get set up. We'll see what they say. But he also has the book, How Not to Die and How Not to Diet. And one is a cookbook. And it seems like that's what a lot of doctors are doing. They'll write a book and then 2 months later they come out with a cookbook. It's like, why don't you put them all together? Okay, but whatever. Anyway, I guess money. But Dr. Greger, what's nice about all his books, he donates it all to scientific research. Dr. Will Bulsiewicz, that's someone else I'm going to quote. He wrote the book Fiber Fuel, and I'm going to read some pages from that. Dr. Neil Bernard. Dr. Neil Bernard wrote the book Preventing and Reversing Diabetes. Don't worry if you don't get all these names. They're going to be in the class notes. Of course, you're welcome to write them down, but they will be in the class notes. Dr. John McDougall, another doctor actually in California, Santa Rosa, California. He has a great health clinic, and you can go to his website, which you'll get in the notes, Dr. John McDougall, and you'll see all the testimonials of people who were able to get off their insulin because they followed Dr. John McDougall. Right, so who's the first one? Oh, first of all, most important, not most important. This just happened. I love when these things happen. I was getting some things for my daughter at the health food store, and I came across one of these magazines. It's called Good Health. And I was looking at it last night, not even looking for anything specific. And look what I found. Is your diet paving the way to diabetes? So I didn't have time to make a slide, so I'm just going to read it. It says, when it comes to type 2 diabetes, what you eat really does matter. A new study shows why. In 2018, a staggering 7 out of 10. That's a lot. That's a majority. Remember that as I finish this article. Staggering 7 out of 10 type 2 diabetes cases were directly related to unhealthy food choices. Type 2 diabetes is a lifestyle issue. That's what it is. You can ask any of the doctors that I mentioned. A lifestyle issue. Of the poor dietary habits studied by the team at Tufts University, Tufts, not Tuff, but Tufts University. So this wasn't studied in somebody's backyard. This was studied at Tufts University. 2 stood out as major contributors to the disease. Eating too much processed meat, eating too much processed food. Yep, hence that picture. Cutting out the processed food. You know, I'm plant-based, I'm vegan, but I'm not telling you you have to go that way. But even if you follow keto or paleo or plant-based, of course, I recommend plant-based, they all say cut out the processed food. That's the number one thing. It combines too many chemicals, too much fat, too much sugar. Cut that out and you're way ahead of the game. But since these detrimental foods make up many of today's meals, it's little wonder that diagnosis rates are expected to continue to rise. That's why it's more important than ever to bypass refined carbohydrates and processed meats in favor of non-starchy vegetables, nuts, seeds, and healthy food. That's what you want as much as possible. Now, when I say I'm Whole Foods plant-based, that doesn't mean I only shop at Whole Foods. I hardly ever go to Whole Foods. You can buy these things wherever you shop. So Dr. McDougall, John McDougall, when he talks about diabetes and you go into his program, and his program is online and his program is in person. He says consumption of meat, dairy, and oils not only causes uncontrollable, but also paralyzes the activity of our own body's insulin. Okay, that's huge, everybody. That's really huge. So I'm gonna change this to there. Causing your sugar to rise. Underlying malfunctions in your metabolism are corrected by replacing unpalatable fats and oils, also known as grease, like healthy carbohydrates you already love, but may be afraid to eat, like rice, corn, and potatoes. That's the key. He's written quite a few great books on being a starchivore or the starch-based diet. He also quotes a study, and this study is big, and again, it's in your notes. Don't worry if you don't remember it today. It's by Dr. Walter Kempner. Dr. Walter Kempner in the 40s, he started curing diabetes in his clinic with his patients coming to him, and he fed them a diet of white rice and fruit. I know that goes contradictory to what you may hear, and I'm not suggesting that diet, but I just think it's interesting that that's the way he was able to get people off of insulin, not only reverse their diabetes, but also other health issues as well. The next one that we're going to talk about is okay. I'm going to stop sharing for just a second. Does anybody have any questions so far about what Dr. McDougall suggests? Let me see something in the chat. Oh, okay, good. So the next one that we're going to talk about, I'll share my screen again. And seems like it's jumping around. The next one is Dr. Michael Greger, who I recently mentioned. Dr. Michael Greger wrote two books, How Not to Die and How Not to Diet. The one that's coming out soon is How Not to Age. He's not talking about, yeah, everyone has to age, of course, but he's talking about ways to prevent things that sometimes are stereotypical associated with aging. So here's what he said. People who eat a plant-based diet have been found to have just a small fraction of the diabetes rate of those who regularly eat meat. As diets become increasingly plant-based, there appears to be a stepwise drop in diabetes rates. Based on a study of 89,000 Californians, flexitarians who eat meat maybe once weekly rather than daily appear to cut their rate of diabetes by 28%. These are good stats, very important. And those who cut out all meat except fish appear to cut their rates in half. What about those eliminating all meat, including fish? They appear to eliminate 61% of their risk. That's huge. And those who go a step farther and drop eggs and dairy too, they may drop their diabetes rates 78% compared with people who eat meat on a daily basis. So we're not just talking about the superfoods to add, but we're also talking about foods to eliminate. So Dr. Neil Bernard says, these are the foods, the top foods to prevent and reverse diabetes. Dr. Bernard, who wrote the book, Reversing and Preventing Diabetes. He's got YouTubes out there. Again, you will get the links. Don't worry if you can't remember their name right now. He says the diabetes-fighting rural Asian diet includes brown rice, quinoa, lentils. My daughter has a lot of lentils in her pantry. I love red lentils, but any lentils are great. Spinach. She's got spinach in there. You can add spinach to anything. Broccoli, oatmeal, tomatoes. Did I say organic tomatoes? Oh, yes, I did. There they are. Bean sprouts and eggplant. I've been making a lot of dishes with eggplant. So these are the key. Here's the key foods that Dr. Neil Bernard recommends to prevent and reverse diabetes. And you'll notice what's something about them. They all contain a lot of fiber. In the book, Fiber Fueled, that I'm going to read from in just a few minutes, Fiber Fueled by Dr. Will Bulsiewicz, he suggests eating 30 different types, 30 varieties of fiber every week. And let me tell you, I did a challenge with another class that I did, the class on in person. I said, let's try to eat 30 a day. Okay, not our whole lives, but by the time you put something in a smoothie or eat something that has lentils and eggplants and tomatoes in it, boom, 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 you are rocking that. And those are the superfoods. So here's a list right there. Memorize that list next time you go to Costco or Winco or wherever you shop. There's another website, and you're going to get the link to it. It's called Mastering Diabetes. And these are two gentlemen. They have their masters in public health or something, I'm not sure. They were diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes, and they have a lot of information at their website. It's called Mastering Diabetes. And what they recommend is that you get 80% or plus of your calories from not processed carbohydrates, but carbohydrates found in whole grains, fruits and berries, vegetables, while the remaining calories come from healthy fats and proteins, not a lot of processed grease. Whoops, where's my summary? Oh, my summary, what I wanted to read was from Dr. Will Bulsiewicz. How many of you remember the, I'm going to stop sharing so we can, how many of you remember the television show Marcus Welby, MD? Okay, so his name is Will Bulsiewicz. So I call him Dr. Wilby instead of Dr. Welby. So let's see what he says about diabetes. So the first thing he says is, complex, unrefined carbohydrates found in whole plant foods are chock full of fiber, vitamins, and minerals. In contrast to that, vicious cycle above complex carbs actually lower blood sugar, even prevent diabetes, and decrease weight and body mass. The point is that we shouldn't make assumptions about our food based on macro or micronutrients. We need to look at the whole foods and nothing but the foods. The fear surrounding carbs is appropriately placed with the refined carbs. Where people say, oh, I avoid carbs, I avoid carbs. You should avoid the refined carbs in processed food. But he says the information is completely misplaced with the unrefined carbs found in whole plant foods. Seriously, fruit is actually the low-hanging fruit, and he does recommend that. The next thing he says about the power of whole grains. In a systematic review of meta-analysis of 45 studies, that's not one or two studies, you know, that's just not the one Tufts. This is 45 studies. Increasing your daily whole grain consumption by just 2 pieces of whole grain bread awarded the participants with a reduced risk of coronary heart disease, cardiovascular disease, and total cancer, as well as a likelihood from all diseases, including diabetes. Right here, I underlined it. Next study, a systematic review of meta-analysis of 16 different studies found that eating at least 3 servings of whole grains per day could lower your risk of diabetes by 1/3. More studies. And then I think the last one, what I really like is eating whole fruit does not cause weight gain. It's actually quite the opposite. Especially important to note, it doesn't cause diabetes either, for that matter. Actually, instead, it can protect against diabetes. For example, As sweet as berries may be, they actually lower blood sugar and insulin release after a meal. Whether you are diabetic or looking to avoid sugar for another reason, don't make the mistake of lumping natural sugar in whole fruit with added or processed sugars. A huge difference. Get off the processed food. In other words, you're looking at when people say, oh, donuts, that's diabetes in action. It sure is, because you're mixing unhealthy, greasy fats with unhealthy processed sugar. And you can't count a jelly donut. That doesn't count as fruit. So you absolutely should be eating fruit. It can help you lose weight and control your diabetes. There you go. So that's what we learned about eating healthy foods. So what are the superfoods? You remember those from the Dr. Bernard slide? Quinoa, lentils, brown rice. What does Fiber Fuel say? Eat the whole grain. Eat the unrefined carbohydrates. Eliminate